Hi, I'm Aaron here at Foto Rentals, and today we'll be discussing a very cool camera, the Mamiya RZ67. This thing is a beast. It's intended as a studio camera, so when you see it, have to understand that its ideal application is indoors and not being carried around. So today we have the 110mm lens on the camera. Alongside here I've also got the 250, the 350, and the 75. It's called the short barrel, though it's not that short. To interchange the lenses, there's this locking ring here. You turn it back to its original position. You bring this white dot, which is on the top, in line with the two red lines. Pull that out and able to put another lens on. To put them on, align them again. Lock it into place. To focus these lenses, this camera has bellows. You'll see here there's a coarse and a fine focus knob, so you can get generally in the direction of where you think you need to be for focus, and then make micro adjustments as necessary. This is the case with all the lenses, so all the focusing comes from the body. On the other side, there's this switch here that acts as a lock/drag, so you can get, finer focus with your rough focus, or keep it in position. With this shutter, you do have to know a few things. There are two switches along here, two white dots. They need to be aligned for the shutter to work. If one of the white dots is turned toward this red dot on the right, it's locked. That means you cannot fire it, which has certain advantages. You won't accidentally take a picture. If it's turned to the left, or the orange dot, that means you're going to mechanical override. In this circumstance, you don't have control over the shutter speed. It will be 1/400th of a second. Now, if you're using strobes, that's not a big deal. This is a leaf shutter, so it'll sync no matter what. The reason I mention the shutters here is that it is the most consistent issue to troubleshoot. It's very easy to accidentally set them one way or the other and find yourself in a scenario where the camera won't fire, which may make you think, oh no, the camera is broken. That's why we say first, make sure these two are aligned. Now that we've covered how to make sure the camera is firing, we can discuss the other elements on it. Over here, you'll see our shutter speed wheel, which you can set from 8 seconds all the way up to 1/400th. You'll see the aperture ring here, each lens depending. The 110mm goes all the way down to 2.8 and all the way up to f32. Directly in front of the aperture ring is a depth of field preview ring, which has both feet and meters on it. You can rotate it to your desired system of measurement, here I have it in feet, to see what the range of acceptable sharpness will be in your pictures. So say, for example, your subject is 7 feet away and you're shooting at f32. Essentially, everything between 5 and 12 feet will be in focus. With this chart, you also get a depth of field preview, and you can see approximately how many feet away you focus to. So for example, with the 110, we are the third red line or the fifth line in, and wherever that line intersects the distance is where we are. When firing the camera in bulb mode, you need to make sure that this switch here on the lens labeled T is covering the N. N is for normal operation, so the second you take your finger off the shutter button, it closes again. But when photographing this way, you open the lens, take the exposure for however long you need to take it for, and then using this switch, it'll close the lens, causing less vibration and therefore a sharper image. For focusing on the camera, you have these two focusing rings, a coarse ring and a fine ring. Coarse focus brings you generally in the direction of where you need to be, and the fine ring lets you make those minor adjustments as necessary. On this side, you can see we have a focus lock. This allows you to move more or less freely depending on how you set the drag. For this one, it's all the way out here to be focused in, and you can lock yourself in that position. On the bottom of the camera, here we have the battery plate. It takes a PX28 inside. You open it by pushing it in here, and you'll see the little battery. You also have the motor drive connection here. This door must be open in order for the motor drive to work. Even if it's attached and it's not open, it won't work. Now let's talk about the back of the camera. In order to take it off, we have this switch here, and you move it over, and you can take the entire back off. As you can see, there are two indicators right here that show you which way the back is oriented. When you put the camera back on, line up the horizontal end with the top of the two orange markings. Once they're firmly in place, lock it with this switch here. In order to rotate it, turn the camera over and set the switch to R so you can rotate the entire back. So even mid-roll, you can go from portrait orientation to landscape orientation. For the shutter speeds on this lens, it syncs at all speeds as this is a leaf shutter. So no matter what shutter speed you're at, whether it be 1/30th of a second or 1/400th of a second, it will sync with your shutter. On the shutter wheel, there are also other settings. AEF allows you to use this AE prism, so you can essentially operate in aperture priority through the camera, and it will meter everything for you. It also gives the ability to control the shutter speed from the top here or use exposure compensation. The RBL setting allows you to use much older lenses meant for the RB67, the older version of this camera. And finally, B is for bulb. Long exposures where you need to leave the lens open. When firing this camera in the studio environment, it's actually ideal to have a double cable release. The point of that is that in this camera, you can activate the shutter from either the front or from the cable release on the side. The purpose being you can lock up the mirror and then activate the leaf shutter. This leaves less vibrations in the camera, especially working at slower shutter speeds in a studio. As you can see here, it fires the mirror up first and then the shutter. That way you don't have camera shake from the mirror coming up during your exposure. The last accessory I'll talk about is the electronic cable release, which has its proprietary connector here. Simply insert it into the front of the camera here, line it up, switched on the downside, and it will act just like the single shutter with your finger. As you can hear, this doesn't give you any of that protection against vibration, but it does give you the ability to set off the camera with a pocket wizard. For normal operation of this camera, you want this switch to be in the middle. This allows you to take one frame per frame. M is for multiple exposures or for dry firing like I've been doing so far. R allows you to rotate the back from horizontal to vertical. The advantage is, when you're looking through the camera, it will actually change the frame of view for you. So when you're looking through it, you'll see either portrait or landscape. Now, we'll load the camera. There are two levers right here. You pull both of them, and this allows you to take the film magazine out. As you can see, we have our take-up spool up top, and we have our dummy film to go through. These helpful little buttons here bring that side in and out so it's easier to get the film in. Orient the film so the tongue is facing outward, and insert it in position. Bring the paper across the back and into the take-up spool, maintaining tension on the roll. Insert the film and begin winding. There is a white arrow on this end where you will line up the arrow to, and then you're set. You're able to reattach the film magazine. You can set the ISO wheel to the ISO you're using as a good reminder of what you're doing, but if you're using the prism finder, this allows it to meter correctly for your film. Reinsert the cartridge, bring the door across, and lock it in with those two levers. And there we go, we have film. We can now wind until we reach 1. At this point, we're ready to begin making exposures. When you have the switch set to the middle, you'll have all the electronic safeguards in place. You won't be able to fire without taking out the dark slide. You'll only make one frame per frame. If you were to accidentally engage the mechanical shutter, all those safeguards go away. So be careful to make sure, like I said earlier, this switch isn't turned to the left. Now we're ready to make some exposures. So the way you use this camera, you flip the viewfinder up and there's a small switch on the inside right here. Push that in and you'll see a finder comes up. You're able to focus through the camera using this lock and drag lever, so you can move the coarse and fine focus wheels as necessary. Once you have your chosen frame and subject, you can lock the focus, remove your dark slide, and there's a handy dark slide holder in the very back of the back. When you're ready, fire and you have an exposure. It will automatically wind to the next frame, so be careful unless you want to make more exposures. If you'd like to take multiple exposures, you can set this to M. So when you fire, you're not winding the film forward. You're simply making another frame on top of the frame you've previously made. Be careful and make sure that your switch is in the middle unless you intend to make multiple exposures. Once you've gotten through your film, you can wind it out till the very end, till it feels loose. Then we can just do the reverse of the steps before. Open these two levers, and you'll see your film all spooled up in the take-up spool area. Hit down this button and take it right out and go get it developed. In the meantime, be kind and rewind. Take your now empty original spool of film and move it to the take-up spool position. Once it's ready, you can either reinsert more film or leave it so the next time you're ready to spool more film. You close it up again, and there you go. Thank you for watching this video on the Mamiya RZ67. I'm Aaron here at Foto Rentals, and I hope we see you soon.